Okay, we are at the end of week 3. I was just listening to the radio on the way over here and mentioned President's Day on the 16th, and I looked at the CSU East Bay calendar, and it does not appear that we get it off. So unfortunately, we still have class on the 16th. Excuse me. However, you might want to jot this down. I'll repeat it again as we get closer. I'm going to be out of town on the 23rd. So you're going to get a day off of class because I won't be here on the 23rd. But I'll announce it as we get a little bit further. But if you're making plans, we don't get the 16th off, but you won't have class with me on the 23rd. Yeah, other classes are going to be running, but at least my class won't be working on that day. Going out of town, but I'll be back on Tuesday, so not a problem. So I'll repeat myself as well as we get closer. So. Okay, so on the agenda today, we have the list view and the recycler view on the menu for today. Got some really cool examples for you. I'm also going to show you another spinner. So this is going to be a custom spinner. I'll start with that first. Then I'm going to go into the list view, kind of refresh your memory on that one. Show you one with images, and then show you one that has add and remove features to it. And then we'll compare and contrast that to the recycler view. Talk about design patterns and talk about adapters and user interface components at the same time. So that's what we're going to do today. So without further ado, let me bring up the first project. The first project is the custom spinner. So let's take a look to see what this looks like. I'm going to run it first so you see what it looks like, and then I'll talk about it. It was actually a scorecard that I put together. It's pieces of it that I kind of pulled out to put together for a teaching example, but it's actually from a real app for a golf course called Whitney Oaks. That's why it says Whitney Oaks up here. It looks like this. So, for keeping score, essentially, and the purpose of the app. This, believe it or not, is a spinner. So when you click on it, it opens up. You can select a hole, like let's say hole number 3, and then you can start your scoring. So it gives you the yards and stuff. You can go like this, and then you could long double tap up here, and I'll show you that double tap event. Brings you to the next hole, to the next hole. So the spinner, though, is the one I wanted to show you. This is the spinner. And so it looks a little different than the spinners I was showing you last time that had just text on it with an arrow on the side. This one's shorter, doesn't take up the whole width, and there's no arrow. Instead, there's a text view and an image. And it looks kind of redundant. I probably could have used something other than these like little holes in here, but it was a prototype app that was put together, so it's kind of hokey looking. So let me take a look then at the code for this spinner. Let's see, clear this out a little bit. So in one of the examples that I showed you last time, we had a on-click listener. It was an on-item selected listener that was done in a separate class object. This project actually has a double-click listener done as a separate class object. Instead of embedding it, you don't have to do it this way. There's but easier ways of doing it. But I just thought I'd point out this is a double-click listener. So it picks up the double tap. And so this class object is an abstract class. So we have an abstract class double-click listener that implements a view on-click listener. And we're going to keep track of the time. So we have the clock time. We're going to start at 0. So the time in between the first click and the second click. If it's short enough, then it's a double click. So it's kind of an easy way of kind of creating a double click. Because we're implementing the interface of the on-click listener, and we can implement an interface in an abstract class as well. That works just fine. And so on the on-click, we are going to get the time, current time, in milliseconds. If the current time is minus the last time is less than this threshold time, this time that we think is the time needed for a double click. Then we're going to perform the on double click method, which is this method here. And the only thing it's really going to do is just going to register a click. So we have an abstract void on double click, another method here, and then we have a variable to keep track of the delta for the double click time delta. So this is arbitrary time. We probably could change the time, make it smaller, make it larger, depending upon if the double clicks are actually registering. There isn't a double click, believe it or not, as a built-in component in Android. There's a click. There's not a double tap or a double click. So this would be either a tap or a click, because essentially we don't have a mouse on our interface. We're going to use our finger and tap on it. So, but it's calling it a click. So it's really a tap or a touch. So in the mobile world. So I'm going to go start with the main activity and talk about a few things about this. This is using an adapter as well. So we've got an adapter, we've got a scorecard details. So this is a fairly interesting architecture. Public class main activity extends app compact activity, implements adapter view on item selected listener. So instead of putting the on item selected listener into a separate class object, or putting it in, using it from an inheritance perspective, because I am inheriting, inheriting from app compact activity, then I can also implement. So again, with Java, you can implement multiple interfaces, although you can only inherit from one class at a time. So, which is why and it does the same thing. Implementing the interface or using the inheritance accomplishes the same task. So I don't know why every time I start talking in this room, and maybe it's the chalkboard, I don't know, and my throat starts getting dry. Okay, so I have an array list of items, and then I have an instance of my adapter. So what's this adapter going to do? Well, it's going to take data and put it into a list somehow, and the adapter is being used as the controller to control the items in the list. So the list of items that I have going on here are a list of holes that are on a golf course. So you don't have to know anything about golf. You can figure out the concept here. There's 18 holes. All 18 of them are being stuck into an array. And then the adapter is being used to manipulate the items that are in the array. So, so this is yet another adapter example. So, okay, so the onCreate, we're going to call super. We're going to set the layout to the activity main. That stuff should look, hopefully start looking familiar. A little support method to initialize the list. And then we have our spinner. So we're going to find our local instance of the spinner. On the UI, over here in the layout, we have the main activity layout. In here, we've got this is interesting. So I've got a relative layout on the outside, and then a linear layout on the inside. So a good example of showing you how to nest different types of layouts together. Didn't necessarily need to put another layout in there, but it makes it easier to organize the items that are on the list. A little text view in there, and then we have that spinner. So the spinner is going to hold this array of items, and then we have a button. The button is going to be the start button from that interface. So it's a fairly simple interface. So that instance of the adapter, we're going to initialize it with the items, and the items is going to be the data that we're using. So my adapter is equal to a new my adapter, this, or main activity.java, you could put that in there, main activity.class, comma items, which is the data. And now we're putting the spinner, we're putting the adapter on the spinner. So just so you know, you can use adapters with any component that holds multiple items. Normally we see adapters on list views and recycler views. but it can also be placed on a spinner. So we've got that adapter going on there. And then we have the spinner dot set on item selected listener. That's a mouthful. A new adapter dot set on item selected listener. And then we have the implemented method, the on item selected. And then for each item selected, we're going to populate the next screen that comes up. So when the user presses, I think I still have it up. Oops. There it is. So when the user presses 2, for example, when we hit the start, we have hole 2 that shows up. And then the double click is what's on this screen up here. So just clicking on the background. There's no button or anything that it's attached to. It's actually attached to the layout. So, and I'll show you that in a few minutes. So we want to return the item. We want to find out which item was selected. And in doing so, the checked item from item is a parent.get item at position, which is what the adapter is taking care of for us. And then we have a name. The name I don't believe is used because it was used in a toast message here. Don't necessarily need to get the name. And then we have that on nothing selected, just like the other example, kind of left it empty. So there's no default action going on. So then we have some buttons. And then on these buttons, we're going to set the on click listener, or on item selected listener. From the spinner, we have the button. The button, we're going to put the set on click listener with a new on click listener. So then when we click on the particular button, we only have one button on the interface, it's going to use an intent to take us to another screen called the scorecard details, which is that screen where we can double tap on that has got all the stats for that particular hole. And then start activity. So this stuff here should start looking familiar. It's an intent being used to bring up an activity from another activity. And here's that support method to initialize the list. It's just going to create an array list. And you're like, oh, I have a lot of array lists in some of my examples because it's a very popular data structure to use for something like this. And then here's where all the whole details are. So we're going to add an item. And the item itself is an actual Java object, which is an item that I'll go to next. Let's see, on item selected, we have, we're just going to bring back a string for the item that was pressed or the name. So item is a core Java item. It's just a regular old object. So you do want to take advantage of object orientation when you're programming on this platform, because objects can hold a lot of data and keep it all organized correctly. Most of my examples are going to have objects in them. You can put objects in array lists, take those array lists, populate them into list views, spinners, recycler views, almost any component. And you're going to keep track of that data using preferably an array list of some sort. Which comes in very handy. All right, so this one, class item, has 3 little variables, fields, and some setters and some getters, some constructors. Your typical Java object is that item. My adapter is the public class my adapter that extends array adapter. Now, I probably could have used just a plain old adapter for this, like an array adapter and not a custom adapter. And this is just showing you how to create a custom adapter. So if I wanted to change something about the behavior, I could make those changes in this class object. But I'm really not. I'm using a get view to return the view that's been selected, to get the drop-down view, return that view, initialize the view. I'm using a menu inflator here. I'm going to talk about menu inflators later on in the course a bit, but this is how we're getting the user interface, the r.layout.score_spinner. We're bringing it to life by inflating it. So it's kind of like it's deflated. We put air in it or something and it comes to life, becomes a true component. So yeah, take the layout inflator and inflating and the concept of inflate. Take that right now just for at face value. We're going to definitely look a little bit deeper into that concept as we go through the course. Yeah, a little text view. We're going to have a text view, local instance called text view name. And we're going to find the view by ID for the text view. And then we're going to get the item, current item, get the item at the position, get the text view, set the text to the particular item. So we can set the text to properties that are in an object. And then as soon as we go from one object to another object, we can just switch the text around quite easily. So yeah, using objects in components does come in handy for the most part. So this is the details page of the scorecard. And you'll see there's a lot of interesting formatting going on with this. It looks more like a typical Java class, in my opinion. I've got my array list up here. I've got images for the plus and minus. That's little add and subtract buttons. A little counter going on. The onCreate does everything you typically see it doing, inflating the layout, setting the context view, getting the items, finding the views by IDs, which is what you're basically going to do in the onCreate method. A little accounting for the scores. So the new scores is equal to the new, because we're going to keep a score for each one of these 18 holes, and then we're going to add them up at the end of the day to see what the final score was. So a little support method to initialize the list, just like before. We were using intents, and we're passing information using the bundle. So the bundle equals you get intent.get extras. So we're using a bundle with that, which you should be playing around with assignment number 1. So, and then we have some data manipulation here, the sample data. We take the data, convert it to a string, do a little character manipulation on it to take off any trailing characters, fix up the formatting essentially, to basically print it to the screen. And then we're going to set our on-click listener in there as well. And then we've got here, we have our instance. So this is where we're using that double click listener. So we're going to cast it to a double click listener. We're not making it, double click is actually an abstract class. We can't make an instance of that object, but we don't necessarily need to. We're using it as a data type. And so we're going to be able to use double click listener here with the set on click listener. Because we're really what we want. We're not setting a standard on click listener. What we're trying to do is pick up that double click, because anyone could just touch it. Like a double tap is like kind of the navigational approach with this. Not necessarily a good design, because sometimes those taps can get kind of confusing for the user. So probably could come up with a better design for the navigation on it. All right. Adding the items to the list, very similar to what we did in the last object there as well. So I put this in here just to kind of give you yet another example. And what I wanted to illustrate here is that you can do a lot more with a spinner than just put countries in there. We saw a list of countries and item 1, item 2, item 3, but we can actually use it for a navigational, and we can put a listener on it, a navigational approach. We could put a listener on it. We can incorporate it in. We can style it so it looks interesting. So anyway, just letting you know, you can do a lot with a spinner. So there's the spinner example. I just thought I'd throw that in there. Questions on that spinner? It's actually called the Whitney Oaks scorecard. That's the name of the course that where it came from. All right, so I'm not going to go back to the original list view, because this one actually contains the same original list view, but more. So before I was mentioning, it's nice to see like a piece of like a string in a list view, but really, what does a list view actually look like in the real world? How are people actually using a list view? This is a better example to show you a full, complete approach to this. So around this time in the course is when I remind you that you are allowed to use any and all of these source code examples that I'm giving you. It is not cheating. If you learn by example, then you could download a example of your choice, open it up like what I'm doing right now, load it up into Android Studio, look at it run, and then use it sort of like a template or like a design idea for incorporating concepts that you want to implement into your apps yourself, because you're going to need to start implementing in assignment number 2. Once you go through the design, by the time you get to assignment 3, you're going to want to like make these features work. And so one of the biggest kind of things is the navigation. How are you going to have the app navigated? This particular example, along with another one I'm going to show you today, is popular for students to use as examples. So that's why I'm letting you know. It is not cheating. These are examples I'm giving you to show you techniques for how to do things. This one here is quite powerful. It's a list view. And it looks kind of hokey, I'll give you that. But it's got a little counter on it. So if you go 0, you got a little thing that says cannot be less than 0 on the minus. So I guess you could use it at like an ordering. It's not a full app, it's just a teaching example. But you could use it kind of like an ordering. But here's the cool part. So you could click on donut, takes you to the donut object. Go back, click on cookies, take you to the cookies, etc. and so forth. So you've got a bit of navigation. What I could do, and I didn't do, whoops, no, that one, is in the details screen, you probably want to put a back button or something in here. I would add like the back navigation. I'm using the emulators control to go back to the previous. So it's not what I'd say a fully functioning example. You know, it is a fully functioning example, but you could do a few more things for navigation in this. And I'm going to show you some navigation in the coming weeks as well. But this example is cool because we're looking at a list view. And not now, instead of just having a list view with a string in there, taking an array list, putting it into a list view, and then having a list of strings, which is what we've seen so far. This has got an image, a string, a button, another image, a number, counting system. It doesn't save any data, but it does definitely, you know, you probably figure out quite easily how to adapt that to whatever theme you're interested in doing it with. So, all right. And then another example I'm going to show you is how to actually programmatically get items into the list, which we'll take a look at as well. But it's nice to be able to see the details on that. So let's take a look at this app. And this app in particular is very well designed. We've got a little bit of redundancy going on because it's necessary. So each one of those items, so let's talk about this kind of theme for a second. Now, unless you're running a donut shop or something, I don't think you necessarily need this, but if these could be flashcards, maybe, or groups of flashcards, or categories of things. Let's say you're doing an expense tracking app, and this could be food, rent, something. And when you click on this, you'll see details of all the food items. And you click on the next one, you'll see the rents, you know, a year's worth or so, or maybe it's an investment or something. Maybe you're renting to own or something. I don't know. You could put books in there, and you can have a list of the books that you bought or something. It does lend itself quite well to both the expense tracking as well as the flashcard interface. If you're going to use a list view. Now, you don't have to use a list view for the UI and navigation. That's completely up to you. We just happen to be looking at list views today. So, all right. So we have a class object, cake, cookies, donuts, and pastries. if I'm click on cake, I don't actually necessarily have to go through all of them. It's not really doing anything. It's just a regular old activity. And these are all separate activities, by the way. This is what I mean by separating things out into separate activities and not putting it all into one activity. Spread it out, make it, then it's more you can navigate it and stuff. All right, so yeah, your basic hello world. Each one of them, each one of these guys has got that. In the user interface down here in the layouts all look the same as well. They only have an image view on them. And the image views are attached to images, as you might imagine, the cake, the cookie, the donut, the pastry. And I just downloaded those from the internet. When it comes to images in your apps, you can use a Pixabay or one of the free image tools. You can use proprietary stolen images because it's a classroom assignment. You're not going to be publishing that app. If you do plan on publishing the app, you do want to make sure you don't have any stolen images in there. Because Android, and believe it or not, the Google market will actually reject the app if you have copyrighted stuff in there. It does a minimal check. It's not going to check everything, and it's not that picky. Apple is a lot more picky when it comes to that. But anyway, yeah, those are stolen images. So just keep that in mind. So we have our images, we have our layouts. So the detail screen in here is pretty simple. You could put a back button on here. You could put, I don't know, another menu. You could put anything you want on here. It's just showing you the details of each one of the items that you clicked in the list view. Okay, so I don't have to go through all of the 4 different items. They're all going to be the same. They're all following the same pattern. And so outside of that, we have the concept of a dessert, because this is really just showing you a list of desserts, right? The dessert itself is a regular core object. So just like the other example, we're working with object orientation. We've got an object in here to represent a concept. Concept is dessert. And it has a name, a number, and a resource ID. The resource ID is going to be the picture that represents that dessert. And so the image that we've selected. So we've got a constructor that takes the name, the number, the resource ID, assigns it, and we don't really have anything else. Setters and getters. I was kind of sloppy. I just got the getters, no setters. So we can't really set anything, but it's kind of stripped out just for simplicity's sakes. So we have an object that represents the type of data that we are storing in that list view. It's called a dessert. And we have a dessert adapter. So the dessert adapter is extending array adapter, and it's typecast to dessert because we're putting desserts in the adapter. So by the end of this course, hopefully you'll be very comfortable using objects in array lists because it has done a lot, actually. All right, so we have our constructor. Our constructor is taking the activity, the array list, and then the object dessert, which is, excuse me, we have the dessert object, and then we have the activity context for which we're adding it. We don't have very much in here. We have a get view. The get view is going to get the item that's in the list. So the view, list item view. So we're going to convert the view. If the list view is null, if it's empty, then we're going to assign a view component to it using the menu layout inflator. And the layout inflator, what we're going to use for the format inside of this list view is this item down here, which is called list item. Common to see the layout file that's being used by the adapter. Common to see it like with this kind of syntax, like list underscore item, because it's showing us our detailed item for the list component. So the list item is a linear layout with an image view, a text view, a button, a text view, and a button. So that's this little layout here is in the item layout. Now, yeah, I could probably make the buttons a little smaller. I'm not a UI designer. This looks like a 5th grader made it maybe, but it's it works. So this is in the item. So this is the list item that's inside of each one of these. Let's see. And in the adapter, we need the list item, we need the format, and then we also need access to the data. The data is going to be the instances of those dessert objects that are, as you guessed it, are going to be put into an array list. So we're going to menu inflate it. We've got our list item. And we're going to get the position of the current selected list item. We have a little text view in there. Most of the stuff in here is for the accounting part of it, so we can add up 1, 2, 3. I'm going to show you another example when I look at the recycler view that has a much easier adapter to look at. This one has a lot of extra stuff because of that counting system that's in there. So we have the number text, and we're going to convert it to a string, but we're also going to be able to put in an image icon that's associated with it. That's the list item, a list item icon, which is the ID of the find view by ID, which is in here. It's the name of the, of the icon. Here it is, list item icon for the image view. So we have an image view, lots of text views, a couple buttons in there. All right. Let's take a look. So yeah, the adapter is making the data available for the events of clicking it. So let's go back to main activity then, or the last one that we have left here. Main activity is actually pretty simple to look at. We are going to keep track of the dessert number, which is going to be the item number. And then here's the big aha. So we have an array list, and we're going to cast it to the data type of a dessert, so desserts. And then we're going to add a new dessert. So we're making our instances of our objects, and we're adding them to the array list all in one shot using the constructor. So this is a new dessert. We have donut, cookie, cake, and pastry, and we're going to assign it with the resources that we have in the drawable folder. So it's fairly straightforward. Make an instance of that adapter. So the dessert adapter, we're going to call it flavor adapter. And then the list view is equal to find view by ID list view, which is the list view that's on the main activity. And then we're going to set the adapter to this instance of the dessert adapter that we created, we called flavor adapter. So we make an instance of the adapter, we make an instance of the list view. We take the adapter, takes the list view with the data and puts it together for us. And we'll see this design pattern over and over again for a few more times. So the list view got set on item listener. We're going to put a click listener on there. And what's going to happen with the click listener? If you're looking for the functionality for when we click on a list item, instead of putting up a toast message, it's actually bringing us to another activity that's specific to the item that we've clicked on. This is the code for it. Now, it's using a case switch. You could have done it with an if else, whatever, but the concept's the same. It's using intents. So when we click on the first one, which is the donut, it takes and creates a new intent, starts activity for the donut. And then we have, this should hopefully look very familiar to you, actually. This should look very familiar because this is what you did in assignment number 1. So really what you're doing with assignment number 2 is you're taking number 1 and you're, as a base concept, now you know how to create an activity. Now you know how to go in between the activities. Now you got to create a lot of activities, create some components to stick those activities inside of, to theme out the app, to create functionality. And then it's just a matter of programming each one of those little items to do what it is you want it to do. So this could be, for example, create a new flashcard, delete a flashcard, take a test or a quiz, see your stats, forget all this buttons and stuff. We could create a menu like this. And then when we click on create a new flashcard, it takes us to the create a new flashcard functionality. We can also do this in a formal menu, and I'm going to be showing you menus as well. When you don't have that many items, and the items you have are very graphical or could be graphical, like with pictures and stuff, one of the options of using a list view does actually come in handy. So, okay, so in here, this is the main activity. We've got an increment and we have a decrement of that counter value. Most of the functionality in here is go up and down on the counter. So all we're doing here is using a linear layout parent view, getting the linear layout on the view, getting the text view that's on there, converting it to a number value, incrementing the number, and we're doing it by doing an integer.parseInt. So we're taking the string, parsing it to an int, going up or going down on it, depending upon if we're decrementing or incrementing. And then printing a message to the screen. That's that little message that came out that said it can't be less than 0. And then setting the text of the string, taking the number, converting it back to a string, and then setting the text on the layout to that new counter value. So it's another example of using a counter. So if, for example, the user was playing the flashcards or something, and maybe this is math and this is history and this is English or something. Maybe they're flashcards and maybe they're divided out by subject area. And you could actually show on the outside how many you've gotten right on the math or how many you got right on the English or something, if you wanted to keep scoring in here. There's no requirement to keep scoring, but might give you some ideas in terms of the UI. So let's see. Yeah, that's pretty much what this example is doing. Questions on the desserts? Nope. All right. Oops, I have it running, it looks like. Stop it from running. Hello. There we go. Let's get this one out of the way. Okay, so this one allows us to add and remove items to the list view. Keep in mind, everything we're doing with a list view can be done with a recycler view. It's just a matter of switching the component over. So let me run this one. Another day now. So this one comes up and it's empty because we don't have any data. So we have to add the item. So when I look at the bottom of the screen here, like very close at the bottom of the screen here where I'm hovering my mouse, there's a little button that says add item. And there's a little prompt on it to edit text that says enter a new item. So I'm going to enter an item. I'm just going to go thing 1, add the item. Oh, look at that. It ended up in a list view. Thing 2, big thing, cool. Another one. I need to put some items on here. This is a test. So now I've got some items populated. In order for me to get rid of this keyboard, I'm using the manual controls. You can actually put a line of code in there to get rid of the key upon like a carriage return to make to hide and show the keyboard, show it. So. But this one's interesting. So I have a thing 1, thing 2, another one, and this is a test. Also in here functionality, a long press deletes the item. So I'm going to get rid of another one. There we go. And see how it got reorganized? So I'm going to get rid of thing 1. Now it starts with thing 2. So the list itself adjusts and the data basically resets. Now I can add another. Oops, I put a line return on that one. So now I have 2 spaces. This is a test. I put a ton of spaces on that one. Oops. There we go. So it's not perfect. It is picking up everything I'm typing in. So I do have a couple. So you'd have to parse that input a little bit, clean it up, take off the line returns. Otherwise, like for example, on this is a test. This one here is like has way too many line returns on it. And then this one is empty. So it will take empty entries too, which probably not such a good idea from a UI perspective. So anyway, how to add and remove items to a list view. Let's take a look. We have in this project, it's simple, which is good. Simple is always good. I have a main activity, and in the layout, I have one layout activity using default. So we'll take a look at the layout. The layout has a list view on it, as you might imagine. And it's using a relative layout, and the list view is above the button add item, so the list view is above. And the list view initially starts out empty because we don't have any items in there yet. And then we have that edit text on the bottom of the screen, and there's a hint stuck in the edit text that is right here. That hint is where we're getting the enter an item showing up. So it's not a bad idea. So it says enter a new item down here. It's not a bad idea. It's kind of like what you do in HTML to put a hint or some context sensitive help on a particular component. But now we don't have to give them instructions. It's kind of self-explanatory. So that's common to see. That is done on the actual interface to it. And then the button's just a regular old button. We have an on-click event. So this one's using a very low-key on-click listener. So on the button click with an on-click event, it's going to do the on-add item. So on-add item is the method that's in the main activity that's going to invoke when the on-click is used. That works with a on-touch as well, by the way. So this is the easiest way of putting an on-click listener on. It is the original way as well. So we have some add text, little label on there. So pretty simple, easy interface to look at. Main activity, just as easy. So we have extending app compact activity. We have an array list of strings. Yeah, there we go, another array list. And then instead of creating a custom adapter, this one's using a built-in array adapter. So we have an array adapter called the items adapter and array lists for the items. Kind of easy. And then we have the items, which is the list view, the local instance of the list view that's going to hold our items. So if you're looking for a simple, quick, and easy way of putting together a list view, this is actually not a bad idea, not a bad example. Setting the context view, and then we have some support methods, one to read the items. Because this one here, I'm gonna shut this app down. And then I'm gonna start it back up again. And this one was called the list view. Which one was it though? Add remove. It's all truncated. Maybe it's this one. Ah, there it is. Guess what? My data's back. So it's also showing you saving data. It's a temporary kind of mechanism. It's not the full data storage that I'm going to show you with shared preferences or with databases. It's actually doing a standard file IO. So, but it's also checked full. So we got more stuff in this example. But yeah, so the data is still here, even when I've come back to that app. And that's how I'm testing it. If you test this by reloading the app, brush again, and regardless of whatever type you're doing, if you're running it in the emulator, like I do this, and start it again, it should come up empty. Oh, no, actually this one, it didn't come up. Oh, it's because I didn't make any changes. If it recompiles and reinstalls, it'll clear out all the data. So if you're testing and you're trying to see if the data is being saved, then when you load it for the test, load it from the emulator instead of loading it from the Android project if you want to test to see if it's saving the data. Otherwise, it will be clearing itself out in between. Okay, so we have a read items method that's going to be further down below. So we're going to make a local instance of the find view by the local instance of the items. So this is the list view. So find view by ID items. And then items adapters, new item adapter this. We're using the Android.R. So that should tell you right there that this is built in. And it's the simplest, simple list item _1. There's about 5 or 6 of these different pre-built templates that you can use. You could also, if you wanted to, create your own layout, stick it in the layout folder, and put the name of that layout right there. So if you wanted to change, what I'm talking about is the format of this cell here. It's the same component, but not like the donuts and the cake where I had a picture and I had buttons and stuff. If you wanted to do something like that to add more items to it outside of a plain old string, then you're going to want to make your own layout item list, and then you would put that name in here. And then we have the items. So the adapter, again, takes the layout, takes the data, puts it together, makes it available, gives us our navigation of it. So the adapter is used for the click events as well to see which item was selected, et cetera, and so forth. So items, that set items is the list view. Set adapter to the items adapter. And then we're going to set up the list view, set up the list view listener, another support method. So again, we're trying to keep the onCreate small, short. Created a couple support methods to call out different functionality. So then we have some methods here that we're going to use. For example, the on_add item. So we have that edit text. Obviously, we're going to get whatever's in the edit text. .get text, .toString. And then items.add the item. So this is the adapter. We're doing a .add on the item itself, and the item itself is a text string. So on the other example, I am adding instances of objects. So the add was taking an object instance. This is taking a string. It depends on the format of the array list. It's going to hold objects, strings, numbers, to convert it so that the add would work. So it has to be in the right format, obviously. And then new item, which is the instance of that object that set text to nothing. So we're going to clear out, as soon as we add it, we're going to clear out this guy so he's empty. And then another support method to write the items. All right. So now for the click listener to delete or remove an item from the list, we're using a long. So we're setting in set on item long click listener. Because the user might just be clicking away, like they might want to select an item. I don't know if I would use a long click listener for delete, but I can get rid of these blank spaces and stuff with it, clean it up a little bit. I would almost do like a double tap or something, or a swipe. So I'm going to show you in another example, probably next week, the swipe left, swipe right, which involves a gesture or a touch listener, which is not very difficult to put together. But for the interface, I think that for deleting items in the list, the swipe is a more popular motion these days, because you could swipe it and then you could stick a red box or something in there that says delete, and then put an undo next to it, or have a snack bar come up on the bottom that says undo. So you have a way of coming back just in case you deleted the wrong item. But from a UI perspective, that's a little bit more common versus a long press. But who knows? You can do a long press or a long click. So here's on item long click. And it's all part of the same library. It's just a different method call that's coming out of the click listener. This is the same on click listener I showed you last week. So, okay, so remove items. See items.remove position. So these remove and add are all built-in functionality that you don't program. That's already given for you in the object itself once you've made an instance of it. So it's one of the best ways of working with Java is that Java utils and the already included functionality that you don't have to reinvent. So items adapter notified that the data set has changed. In doing that, guess what? That automatically reorganizes your list view for you. So if there's a hole in there, it reformats everything. You can actually sort the items in this list view as well, like by alphabetical order. You can search for items in it. There's a lot of extra functionality that works with the adapter as well as the array list that gives a lot of automated behaviors, as long as you know what methods to call. So then we have our read items and our write items. So what are we doing here? So we're going to create a file, get the directory for the file. So this is the files directory. And then we're going to do, here's a file to do, which is equal to a new file. And we're going to call it to-do.txt. So yeah, we're just writing stuff to a flat file. I'm going to show you how to do shared preferences, which is going to give it a more, it's still a file, but it'll give it a format. And the format will have like key value combinations, very similar to like a Python dictionary. So shared preferences is definitely a little bit easier to work with in terms of efficiency. But yeah, just writing this stuff to a plain file works too. There's no requirement for assignment number 2 that you add data, that you save data persistently. We'll be doing that in assignment number 3 or 4, one of the later ones. And I'll show you a couple more different techniques as well, but this is the first technique. This one's using a file utils, and it is reading line by line. So we're saving the stuff, writing it line by line, and then reading it line by line out of the this text file. And I'll show you how to see this text file in a few minutes. So we have items is equal to new array list. We have this file utils going on. We're going to catch an IO exception if it happens. And then otherwise the items is equal to a new array list string. We're going to return it. So here we are automating by using this library. And then to write the items, again, we're going to get the directory, get the name of the file, and then do a try catch. And this one's going to be on file utils, which is a class level method that we're running here, write lines. So we've got read lines. Then this one line of code is doing everything for us, by the way. It's reading all the lines. This is writing all the lines, and then catching any exception that might exist. So in order to use this library, there is an add-on that you have to add, or a library that you have to add. You don't have to install anything. You don't have to download anything. It's in the Android SDKs. But this is the first example of how to add more behaviors or more features to the standard SDK. So I put a little note in the bottom here on what you need to do, and I'll show you real quick here so you can sort of see what I'm talking about. So in order to get this, you need to change the dependencies in the Gradle. So the one that you're going to be changing, and you might just make a note of this one because it's going to happen again and again when you decide to add new stuff. If you do, it's the second one. It says module.app. If I double click on that and I go down and to the bottom of the file, so if I look at this, I've got plugins in here. I've got some Android configurations. On the bottom, I see these things called dependencies. They're sort of like includes, but they're not. It's going to go out to this repository. It's online. The line that I added was this one right here. It's adding the org Apache Commons. This is the library that was added. And I stuck that at the bottom of this as a little cheat sheet. So you click on it, you click on that module one, And there's like 5 or 6 different options there, so you want to make sure you get the right one. And not all of them are going to have dependencies in there. And you copy and paste, you stick that in there, and that's the dependency for the file IO. And so once you make a change, you're going to see something up here. In fact, let me see if I can mimic this change here. No, I really didn't change anything. Here I can take out, let me take out JUnit. Hopefully I won't mess up my project. And then I see up here, Gradle files have changed since the last project. Sync now. You have to sync it. If you don't sync it, you're going to have a problem with it. So I'm going to actually undo it. All right, I'm not going to sync it. Oops, we got somebody in the chat here. Do backspace. There we go. Put it back. I've still changed it, so it's still telling me to sync it, but let me just make sure that that is not a question. Oh, nope, it's not a question. Okay, good. I know some people write questions in the chat, and I'm like, oh my God. And it's like, no question. Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, so yeah, so now we've seen how to add a library or a dependency. You'll be tempted to go through all the rest of them. Don't be editing these files. It's probably going to break things before it does anything else. And project properties and stuff in here are set by other things. The only one you really are going to want to change is adding dependencies. That's pretty much all you're going to do with these Gradle files. So if you go online and you see a solution, it says, change the something or other to this, to that, and it's having you do a bunch of editing to the Gradle scripts, don't do it. Don't do it. Because you'll mess up the project. You'll have to recreate the project is what you'll have to do. It's not going to mess up your Android Studio. It's just going to mess up the project. But adding dependencies in the script, this one on the top, you would think would be the one that you'd edit, but it's not. It's basically not providing us very much at all actually on the project. So it's this one here. It's the second one down. All right. So the emulator has got a bunch of files on it. We can get at these files and we can see the content of this emulator. So I know there's a text file on there called to do. I adapted it from a to-do list, by the way. That's why it's called to do. But if I go into the tools and then click open the device manager to see it, or click it if you have it open in your window. If I click on these 3 little dots on the right-hand side, and I go into the Open in Device Explorer, I see now a list. Let me make this screen a little bit bigger. I see a list of files. This is the content of my emulator. And in my emulator, I've got some folders in particular. I should have a public folder in here. Of course, I didn't take note to see exactly where I copied that file, but it is public access. It's probably on the SD card, perhaps. But each one of the apps has app space that you can see in here. So if I go into, let's take a look here. Data, and then data, and then I look at the path. So it's kind of a roundabout way of doing it, but my ones start out com.example. So all of the Android ones are in the beginning. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger so we can sort of sip that one. Too many windows open. There we go. So go into data. It's kind of redundant, but it is. That's how it works. And then scroll down. So here we go. Here are some of my projects. This project is called ListView Add. So it is in alphabetical order. Here it is, ListView with images, ListView demo. Here, ListView Add and Remove. That's the one. I'm gonna open that one up. And I got some files in here. And look at that. There's that to-do file. And so if I double click on it, it will open it up in another window, which is right here. This is thing 2. This is a test, another I misspelled another, it looks like. So this is the content of that list view that we see out there. So we know it's not very secure, although this space is not public. This is private for the particular app. So each one of our apps has its own space on the, and this is not on the SD card, by the way. I'm going to be showing you in a future lecture how to write to the SD card, or read to the SD card. Right now, what we're doing is we're using, in this particular technique, we're using the app space. So if we had a huge file, it would take up too much memory and it would cause our app to run slower. So each app actually runs on an island of its own, in its own dedicated app space. What we're looking at here is the hard disk space. This is a fixed amount of space that doesn't increase, and it's not that big. Depends on the SDK version that you have in terms of how big the space is. But in here we have the cache, we have the files. In this particular case, we don't really have very much going on. This should all be empty because I don't really have anything cached. But I do have an open file that I'm using, that to-do.txt file, so I can see that in here. I could write to the SD card. I could write to public download folders and things where they would be accessible. This is not accessible outside of the app. So another app couldn't come in here and use this text file. And the general, like in the interface itself, on the emulator or on the phone, you can't get at that particular folder. It's locked. So there are ways of writing to folders that are not locked. However, users don't like it when you fill up their SD card. But if you're creating a music app, for example, and you're downloading music files, you can actually, instead of putting them on the SD card, or you can just put them in the music library. So you can add, and these are called content providers. So it depends on what you're trying to accomplish with the file or with the data that you're downloading in terms of what technique you're going to use. This is just a primitive IO technique to open right to a file, close a file. It works just fine. I wouldn't do it for more than like a small amount of data. So, because at one point you're going to fill up the space with all of this data. When it comes to like content that you're downloading, pictures and things, those are all going to go into the content provider. And so there's a mechanism to read and write to content providers that we're going to see in this class. That's going to be you'll be able to store your content from your app and in terms of the general folders that are being used for other content that is generated. So there is definitely a separation between the content and the presentation of it. So just keep that in mind. So anyway, so this example is kind of loaded. We've got our text file. And I don't believe I have anything else interesting in this app. So I'm not going to sync it now. I'm just going to shut it unless we have questions. Oh, all right, so let's shut this guy down. Actually, I'm going to make sure I shut this down. Next time I open this up, it's going to be, that's all right. We'll leave it alone. Okay, get rid of that one. Last but not least, so we looked at this list view demo last time, by the way. This is the simple one that just shows a list. Let's look at a recycler view. Long-awaited recycler view. The recycler view is very similar to the list view. Looks like a list view, smells like a list view. It is a list view, but it's got a few extra features to it. So this design pattern I'm going to show you is exactly like the ones that I've shown you on the list view. Here we go. So we've got a recycler view. Now here I actually made the border of the lines a little thicker so they're a little darker, customized a little bit. If you want to customize the view component, it's best to use a recycler view versus a list view because it has more features, more customizable. And it's better to use if you have a lot of data, tons of data, better to use a recycler view versus a list view. So because the recycler view has garbage collection. That is really the only difference between the two components. So don't run out and just use a recycler view for everything, because if it's just a small little list, it's easier and more efficient to actually use a list view. It's only for large quantities of data do you want to use a recycler view. So if you're doing a flashcard app and you're trying to decide between a list view and a recycler view, it doesn't really matter which one you use, because unless you're going to have hundreds of flashcards, hundreds of objects, probably not going to run out of room with the list view. Plus, you can always change it in the future. So this one here is using some default icons. It's using a string in here, an icon. It's not doing very much. It's very similar to the other examples we've looked at. When I click on an item, it is giving me the name of the item I've clicked on. So it has an active click listener that's working. So, all right, start with main activity. Main activity, and here we have Android X and the recycler view widget. So that's where we're getting the recycler view from. That's the widget itself. Again, it's from Android X, not from Android. It's just a newer library. At one point, they started putting X on there, and then they said, okay, no more numbering system. Everything's now Android X. If you look at some examples online for recycler views, you'll see version 7, version 6, version 8, all these different versions. Forget about it. Don't do the versions. Just do Android X. So take out the, if you're programming something and it's got a number in it, get rid of it. It's too old. It's like a bad example. And there's a lot of examples on the internet that are using the numbering system, which is not, it's just old. Okay, so what do we have here? We've got, as you might imagine, an array list. So actually, this is a list of objects. The objects, it's a my list data, and it's actually my list data. So my list data is core Java object. So we have a string, we have an ID, we have a constructor, setters and getters. So we've got an object. You're going to have an object data type of practically everything. If you're doing a flashcard, it's going to be a flashcard object. The interface, the main activity, the resource file for the interface is got Android X recycler view. That's the only thing on it. So we just have a recycler view on the main interface. Main activity, that's the main activity. The recycler view itself has got a inside item. So it's a list item UI interface to it, and layout. And we're using a relative layout for that. And we've got an image view, as we saw, and a text view. So simple image view, text view. So it's not using, it's using a custom layout. It's not using a built-in one. If you just have one item and it's just a string, then you just use the built-in one. But if you want to put other stuff on there, like an image and buttons and stuff, yeah. So anyway, so this is our text view and our image view that's on our item itself. And then now we have, let me go back to main activity. So we're going to make some new instances of these objects. And here's where we're getting those icons from. Just like the layout file came from android.r, so do these built-in image icons. So the image icons that are showing up in that recycler view are coming from android.r.drawable. And so we have the dialog for the match. Some of them don't match. I just did an assortment. They don't match like delete. Well, actually delete matches, info matches, email. I guess some of them do match, but email, yeah, they do kind of match. And this actually is a scrollable list too. So, but yeah, that's how we're getting those icons. So these are the built-in SDK icons that are part of the actual phone functionality. So if you want to use those, they are open to. You can use the exact icons that's in the SDK. That's in the user interface that's, your customers are used to seeing, especially ones for the dialer and stuff. Makes a lot of sense. These are old because I'm working with the an older version of Android on this example. So making a local instance, finding the view by ID for that recycler view, copying it to a local instance, taking and creating a instance of that adapter, new adapter, and sending the adapter the list data object type, and which is this list data, which is an object. It's an array of objects of list data. And then RecyclerView.set has fixed size. So we're going to fix the size of it. And these are just some parameters, optional parameters that are set on this recycler view, which is another thing that you get with the recycler view that you don't get with the list view. You have a lot of these settings that you can do. So here we can turn off the scrolling, we can fix the size. Here's what we have we're going to use a layout manager for a linear layout manager. We're going to set the adapter to the adapter that we're going to do. The adapter is going to be my list adapter that's going to be implemented here. Here is my list adapter. So it's the same design pattern, same format that we've seen in the last 3 or 4 examples of the list view. It's just now applied to a recycler view instead. So, and then my list adapter is here. My list adapter is going to make it a local instance of that data of the array of objects that we created. And we have a little constructor for it to make the adapter itself by sending it the data, which is what we saw the call to in the main activity. And I'm going to have a little bit more information for you on this in form of a PowerPoint, believe it or not. Probably going to do it next week, talking about the view and the view holders. There's some concepts associated here that are part of this adapter that you need to be familiar with in order to adequately program these adapters. One of them is the life cycle of the actual view component. So just like we have the onCreate in the activity, this one has a onCreate view holder. So we have a life cycle to the view holder, and you're like, well, what in the world is a view hold? It holds the items in the view. So it's like this is the easiest definition for it. It's a view component that I need to give you a little lecture on so that you know the terminology that's going on. But just take this one with a grain of salt. We have two distinct components that we program in here. One of them is the view holder, and the other one is the binder. So on bind of the view holder. And then the rest of this is stuff you've seen already. It's, getting count, getting the item that was selected. The click events that are associated are the same. So that type of programming is the same that we saw in the list view. It's just applied to the recycler view. But next week, this is a good stopping point actually. Next week, I'm going to talk about view holders and binders and the concept of what this adapter is actually doing. So I've seen some adapters. Next week, I'm going to get into a little bit more details in terms of how these adapters work. Because the adapter concept is kind of universal. It applies to a lot of different components that we're going to see. So we've seen it in 2 already, the list view and the recycler view. Actually saw it with the spinner too. So it's helpful. So I'm going to leave you with that because I don't want to talk any further on these until I give you the PowerPoint stuff on it. So I'll see you next week for some more exciting Android stuff. So have at it. Start thinking about what you want to do for assignment number 2. Questions online or here? Nope. Oh, we got a question. Nope. Have a good day. No question. Thank you. I'll see you next time. Have a great day. All right. Tired today.